Yo, 95% rookie here. Um, I'm going to just be doing like one of those another like low key kind of lore videos this time. Basically, just off the cuff talking over what I'm doing in the game, and yeah, just the topic this time. I was just thinking like I don't know. I was just thinking like making missions of out the AAF and stuff, and kind of the topic came up that there are these, if you notice around the map on Altus and Stratus, there are all these, this one in particular, this was attacked during one of the campaign missions, but there are these military bases, these like FOBs with the tower, and I mean they vary in like size and complexity, but generally these are basically FOBs located in remote areas. There's a few around, there's like some now down here, there's like this one here. They're located around the map anyways, and I'm gonna have my outline on the side. Hopefully, maybe I'll just flash for a second. You can pause and read it in case I miss anything, but I'll be trying to go through my outline just so it's a little more structured. But these FOBs, and this is how I imagine it. Like how would one of these FOBs located in these remote areas and then other areas on the map, how would they operate like day to day? What would be their kind of their how would they operate essentially? And I was just like imagining, so these are probably stationed in like a variety of areas, but like your typical one, like depending on the size and stuff, would probably be equipped with like, I don't know, like probably like around a dozen to like 30 like troops, I would imagine, like about platoon size depending on complexity. Maybe some of them would be understaffed. Like I imagine some of them in certain areas, depending on the intensity they'd be expecting. Like for example, the ones in the north, where there's a lot of FIA operating in this northern area. Actually, let me just make sure my cursor is on for the video capture. There we go. Yeah, so these northern areas, where this would be like kind of the high intensity, like it's very rural. There's like a lot of FIA activity, like whereas down here is less rural. There's less places for the FIA to hide, so there's probably less FIA activity in there. So what I'm saying is some of these areas were probably a much higher intensity in terms of what they would be expecting to face. So they would probably be staffed better than the other ones. But anyways, so like yeah, roughly a platoon, depending on what they were expecting to face and depending on staffing levels and stuff. I'm sure the AAF has some sort of manpower issues and all that. They're probably like, yeah, understaffed in less key or intense areas versus these ones up here in the more combat intense areas would probably have more troops, and they would likely, the way I imagine it, right? So this one around here, it would probably be in control, like expected to operate in like an area like this, something around here. Probably each one kind of probably covers a certain radius, a certain area of responsibility, and they're probably placed in key places of where they see or expect FIA activity to be happening. And the way I imagine it works is, you know, these are dotted around. They're each controlling a certain area, and they would be in charge of like smaller operations as far as like day to day. They'd be doing things like keeping the peace. Like if there's maybe a civilian dispute, I don't know if there may be police and all this, but they might operate as a form of police in certain areas. You know, dealing with disputes between civilians, maybe investigating reports of guerrillas, like if a civilian comes forward or whatever. And they'd probably be in charge of smaller anti-enemy operations. So for example, like setting up checkpoints. Like they might set up like a checkpoint, set up a checkpoint over here, like, you know, in the area, and they'd be in charge of, you know, checking vehicles coming through in case there's any enemy activity or anything. And then probably they would also be doing smaller patrols into like villages and compounds and stuff, just to make sure that you know, there weren't any enemies operating in their immediate vicinity. And the way I imagine it is for larger operations. So for example, if they have intel on an enemy, like an FIA larger base or force, I don't think these FOBs would be sending out, like, you know, if they have two to three squads maybe on hand, they probably wouldn't be sending out like half their force just to attack these places. These would probably be, you know, if you locate one of these bases, you would send it up the chain of command, and an operation would be planned for, you know, probably with CSAT assistance later on in the pre-Eastwind times, to attack one of these FOBs using, you know, you might pull forces from these FOBs, but I imagine like for the more serious operations, you would be, you know, having a dedicated task force or force operating outside of your typical outpost structure, and they would be sent in to, you know, eliminate an FIA, you know, an outpost or a base, something where you're expecting more combat than your typical, you know, like 2 or 3 guys. And my thinking on that would be like, the reason why you would do that, for example, is if you, so when you're sending these troops out to attack one of these FIA bases, you're not just leaving your FOB completely undefended so they can come in and steal all your shit. I mean, I'm sure it does happen. Yeah, it's not like the AAF are supposed to be super, you know, strategically minded, but they do have CSAT, you know, helping them out with command and control and stuff. So I imagine they aren't just doing, you know, fucking around. But yeah, so I imagine there'd be dedicated, larger, and better equipped mechanized forces. So these bases would have, you know, maybe like a few trucks and stuff. They'd have like, you know, maybe if they're lucky, they'd get like an APC or something. You know, probably have like some Striders, maybe like Striders with gun platforms. Probably a lot of static launchers and stuff on the located on the tops up here. But yeah, it's like, so it's more of a defensive posture, right? They're not really expected to go out and launch major offensives. So these other forces, so probably located in more key sectors, like maybe in cities and stuff where there's military bases, they would be operating nearby on like a quick reaction force basis in case one of these FOBs or a town or whatever, if there's a spotted enemy force, they would send in these more prepared mechanized forces, maybe with air support and all that, to deal with them rather than sending out these lightly equipped outposts. Yeah, and these I imagine like a QRF, for example, like if there was a QRF station like here, that QRF would probably be able to respond to any incidents within a larger region as well. So like there's an FOB over here and an FOB over here, there'd probably be one QRF located somewhat nearby, and they would respond to either one of those, just so you don't have like a dedicated QRF assigned to each FOB. Probably have like a mobile force ready to react to any one incident in the area. And to that end, I feel like if the FIA were to do diversionary attacks, that might be smarter than just you know, attacking an FOB in the first place. You know, if you can bait out one of these quick reaction forces or maybe some patrols from one of these bases to go somewhere else, that makes one of these FOBs easier to attack, I would assume, because, you know, that reaction force would be dedicated to something else. They probably have backup like airborne and stuff like that in case there's an example like that. But I imagine, you know, it's going to be trouble if multiple of these FOBs come under attack at the same time or at different times. You know, one gets attacked and then an hour later another gets attacked and your forces are already dealing with that other one. You know, probably would be the way to go. Day to day, I imagine like what they're doing is, like I said, checkpoints, all that stuff, and they're likely doing like recon. So like I imagine like most patrols would be dedicated to towns and investigating reports and all that, but you'd probably be sending in like maybe smaller recon patrols, maybe on quad bikes or something, low visibility, like being sent into areas. Now, I don't think the AAF have like dedicated special forces. They do have like snipers and stuff. So there may be some kind of like AAF special forces we aren't really aware of as far as the order of battle and stuff goes. Maybe they would have those guys be doing the recon stuff rather than your average AAF, like, you know, sending a fire team to an area to set up a little observation post to look for enemy activity. But, you know, like it would make sense, like, if you're the AAF, that you would send in like a low visibility platoon to just set up like a little like camp here just to watch the surrounding area without being visible to the enemy, you know, because, you know, these FOBs, they take a while to set up. The FIA are generally going to know where these things are and how to avoid what they're seeing. So you're probably going to want to send in like smaller patrols and smaller observation posts in order to just check out activity that is avoiding your FOBs on purpose. As far as like their operational status, I imagine these bases, some of them, depending on the base, like some of them are located nearby to cities in more urban areas. Some of them like are located in much more rural, like rural areas. Like there's one of them up here in the north somewhere where it's like, okay, these bases they're probably the most well staffed and armed just because they're more likely to be coming under attack, and they're probably well supplied to that you aren't sending in a resupply truck every week, versus like if you are in a more secure area, you can probably afford to send in resupply quite often just because you're not expecting those resupply trucks to be taken out, right? But if you're sending in a resupply to a high danger area, this FOB is probably going to be, it's going to need to be a larger convoy or aircraft or whatever, and they're probably going to need to be protected, because that would just be asking for trouble, resupplying a base in the middle of enemy territory, right? And yeah, so they probably, and as these resupplies go in, I imagine, as far as troop rotation, I imagine in like the more intense areas where you're going to be expecting combat more often, you're probably going to be rotating your troops in and out of these FOBs. So like, you know, you'd have your platoon of guys, and maybe they would be stationed at this FOB for like a month or however long, just so you're not wearing down your troops too much. You're going to rotate them out, either have them sit on a lower intensity post, or maybe just send them to another FOB like in an area where you're not expecting trouble, just so they can, you know, wind down a bit, just so your guys aren't high strung all the time. Because, you know, some of these bases probably don't see any action, and some of them are like constantly being, you know, attacked, and these attacks probably range from like, you know, a straight up like assault and attempting to grab supplies like in that one campaign mission, or you know, could be just like a sniper sets up, takes a few pot shots at guards or whatever, and just like, you know, just to harass them. There's probably harassing attacks going on quite often. That includes like if you set up an outpost on an outlying area assigned to this FOB, they're probably going to be targeting that roadblock occasionally, or patrols or whatever. You're going to be targeting the lower risk targets versus the FOB probably more often. So, you know, I imagine like if you're in a remote area, you have a roadblock, you're gonna have some decent security set up for it, rather than like, you know, just two guys, because that would just be a pretty easy target for the FIA to engage. And you're gonna need a larger FIA force to attack one of these if you're planning to take the supplies. Especially, you're going to want to be quick, because if there is a QRF nearby, they're going to respond pretty quickly, I imagine. The FI are obviously going to attack just so we can control in general. Like, if you want to have operations in an area and this FOB is blocking your path, you're going to want to, you know, weaken it to an extent. Although that might be counterintuitive, honestly. If you attack an FOB, they're going to replace anyone you take out. So, and they're probably going to step off operations in that area. So I don't know, maybe if you want to operate somewhere, you'll attack a base somewhere else to pull troops away from a different area versus attack to weaken them, because, you know, they're obviously going to reinforce, provided there's manpower available and all that. Yeah, and I mean, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. Just a basic, like, you know, just thinking out loud about how one of these operations would happen day to day. I know I did that one about the that video about the AAF patrol or whatever, the day in the life of an AAF soldier. That's kind of what I'm thinking, like, just thinking about more of the how these day-to-day operations would go. Because, you know, thinking realistically, like, I was thinking making more videos like this, but A lot of it is going to be conjecture and basically making shit up on my own and just kind of basing it based on what I would think would happen. I'm by no means like a military expert or anything. I'm like an enthusiast a little bit, but I'm thinking like a lot of this stuff, like when you see like an FOB in a mission in Arma 3's campaign, it should not be taken as gospel as to how that's how a force would operate. It's more like the gameplay considerations come first in situations like that. So it's like, you know, I think thinking about the lore, how a force would operate in this, you have to think beyond like what you see in game. I think it just kind of works like that because yeah, I think it's more interesting to think of this stuff being more complex than you see, just because it kind of would have to be, right? You know, a lot of the stuff in the Arma 3 campaign doesn't really make much sense as far as operations and all that goes. And that's not a knock against the game. It's just, you know, when you're making a campaign, you can't think, it's not like you're like George R.R. Martin thinking about every little intricate system involved in this game. You're just making a fun mission, and you know, they did think a fair bit about the world, but you know what I'm saying. It's not, you're not thinking about like how the AAF gets their you know, how your average AAF FOB gets their resupply every week when you're making the lore. So if there's anything that contradicts how it would work, you know, that's one of the things to consider. But you know, I think it's fair for someone like me who's interested in the lore stuff to kind of conjecture and make up my own you know, proposals. It's not like I'm saying this is how exactly it would be. This is just kind of how I imagine it is, and when I'm making missions or content, that's kind of what's going through my mind. So at least maybe these videos shouldn't be taken as like a actual like this is how it is. This is more like how someone like me thinks about the Arma 3 world. Kind of maybe it'll expand your horizons a little bit as far as how you think some of these things would operate and all that. I think it's fun to think about stuff like that, thinking about the smaller scale or even larger scale, just like the background stuff you don't think about too much. And I think Arma 3 in general is very good at thinking about stuff like that, like, you know, with the Laws of War DLC, stuff like that. Things you wouldn't typically see in a first-person shooter video game are actually given consideration and fleshed out, which I think is cool about Arma 3, and, you know, fun to think about this stuff on your own. So anyways, probably a shorter video. Maybe I'll edit in some stuff. I'll just edit in that the list of what my talking points. It kind of gives you an overview of what I talked about here. But yeah, expect more stuff in the future. I've been playing War now. More I saw those videos. Those videos haven't been doing too well. I enjoy making them though, so I might be making more content for other games soon. But I still do plan to make Arma stuff. I am working on more Operation Flashpoint Let's Play stuff as well. That game's been actually pretty fun. I've been enjoying that. Yeah, thanks for watching, and hope you have a good day.